Hello everyone. So today I'm going to describe about the metabolic interrelationship among the major tissue in the well-fed state. So the various tissue and organs of the body work in a well-coordinated manner to meet its metabolic demands. So the major organs like liver, adipose tissue, muscles and brain, along with their most important metabolic functions in the well-fed state, usually after 2 to 4 hours after the food consumption. I'll describe that in detail in this video. So first of all, let us talk about the liver. In liver, after the well-fed stage, the carbohydrate metabolism, lipid metabolism and protein metabolism occur. The liver is specialized to serve as the body's central metabolic clearinghouse. So it processes and distributes the nutrients to different tissues for the utilization. So after a meal, the liver takes off the carbohydrate, lipids and most of the amino acid. It processes them and routes to the other tissue. The major metabolic functions of the liver in the absorptive states are, so you know that after the well-fed states, it has the glucose. The glucose goes into the HMP shunt, and also there is conversion of the glycogen in the well-fed state. So also there is the conversion of the glucose to the pyruvate, and from the amino acids that are consumed from the diet is converted into pyruvate, and amino acids are also converted towards the protein. Also there is more conversion of the ammonia to urea. Also the pyruvate is converted to acetyl coenzyme A, and this acetyl coenzyme A participates in the Krebs cycles for the production of the energy. Also the acetyl coenzyme A is converted into fatty acid, and the fatty acid eventually is converted into triacylglycerol. So in the carbohydrate metabolism in the well-fed state in the liver, there is increased glycolysis, increased glycogenesis and increased hexose monophosphate shunt, but there is decreased gluconeogenesis. In the well-fed state, the gluconeogenesis is very negligible. Whereas in the lipid metabolism, there is increased synthesis of the fatty acid and the triacylglycerol. There is increased synthesis of the fatty acid and triacylglycerol in the well-fed state. The protein metabolism, there is increased degradation of the amino acid and increased protein synthesis. So degradation of the amino acid is rapid in the well-fed stage along with the production of the protein. So in the well-fed stage, the liver does this type of metabolism. So now let us discuss about the adipose tissue. Adipose tissue is regarded as the energy storage. So as much as 15 kg of the triacylglycerol, which is equivalent to 1,35,000 calories, is stored in a normal adult man. The major metabolic function of the adipose tissue in the adsorptive state are basically the carbohydrate metabolism and lipid metabolism occurs in the adipose tissue. So the glucose we have the glucose molecule. This glucose molecule goes into the HMP shunt. Also the glucose molecule is converted into pyruvate. This pyruvate eventually converted into acetyl coenzyme A and ultimately gets converted into fatty acid. So this triacylglycerol, which is present initially in the liver, can also be converted into fatty acid in the adipose tissue. And this acetyl coenzyme A participate in the Krebs cycle, and from the glucose molecule glycerol is formed and triacylglycerol is formed. So that means in the carbohydrate metabolism in the adipose tissue, the uptake of glucose is increased significantly, and this follows an increase in glycolysis and hexose monophosphate shunt. That means glycolysis is excessively increased. Also hexose monophosphate shunt is excessively increased. Also there is formation of the glycerol, and ultimately from the glycerol triacylglycerol is formed. And in the lipid metabolism, the synthesis of the fatty acid and triacylglycerol is increased, and the degradation of the triacylglycerol is diminished very much in the well-fed state. Now let us talk about the skeletal muscles. The metabolism of the skeletal muscle is rather variable depending on its needs. So for instance, the resting muscles of the body utilizes about 30% of the body oxygen consumption. However, during the exercise, this may be high as 90%. So there is variable of the energy consumption depending on which state the person is. The most important metabolic functions of the skeletal muscle is the carbohydrate, lipid and protein metabolism. So we have glucose as the central molecule. Glucose is uptake by the muscle, and it is converted into the pyruvate, and glucose also can be converted towards the glycogen, and this pyruvate eventually be converted into acetyl coenzyme A, and it participate in the Krebs cycle for the production of the ATP. The amino acid also produce protein in the muscle cells. In the carbohydrate metabolism in the skeletal muscle, there is uptake of glucose is higher and the glycogen synthesis is increased. And the lipid metabolism, the fatty acid are taken off from the circulation, are also important fuel source for the skeletal muscle. And the protein metabolism, there is incorporation of the amino acid into protein is higher in the well-fed state. Now let us talk about the brain. In the brain there is uptake of the glucose, and this glucose is converted into pyruvate, and this pyruvate eventually converted into acetyl coenzyme A, and this acetyl coenzyme A enters the Krebs cycle for the production of the energy, that means ATP in the brain. So the human brain constitutes about 2% of the body's weight, but it utilizes as much as 20% of the oxygen consumption by the body. So being a vital organ, especially priority is given to the metabolic needs of the brain. So carbohydrate metabolism in the brain in the well-fed state, in an absorptive state of glucose is the only fuel source for the brain. So about 120 gram of glucose is utilized per day by the adult brain. This constitutes about the 60% of the glucose consumed by the body at rest. So it is estimated that about 50% of the energy consumed by the brain is utilized by the plasma membrane, sodium, potassium, ATPase, to maintain the membrane potential required for the nerve impulse transmission in the brain. And looking at the lipid metabolism, the free fatty acid cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. Hence, their contribution for the supply of energy to the brain is insignificant. So, but in the starving stage, the ketogenesis, mainly the ketone bodies are the source of energy for the brain. That is, I'll explain the ketogenesis. That means the role of ketone bodies in the starving stage, the interrelation and about major tissues in the starving stage. I'll discuss that in the next topic. So the metabolic interrelation among the major tissue in the HRP state are described. So I hope you understood this video. So major organs like liver, adipose tissue, muscles and brain heavily depend on the glucose and its metabolism for the generation of the energy. So I hope you understood the lecture on metabolic interrelationship among the major tissue in the well-fed state. So in the next topic we'll discuss about the metabolic interrelationship among major tissue in the starving stage. So I hope you understood this lecture. Thank you.